Yep. We turn on. Give me a set.
All right, we'll wait for your cue.
Okay. And it should be live streaming.
Okay, does that mean we should go for it? Or is there a way for us
Yep.
to see
Yes.
the live stream?
It should be live stream. Let me see. Something is going on in my end. Yes. Okay, the stream started. Okay, we can get going then.
Okay, great. That sounds great. Well, hi everyone, welcome. This is Invisible Leaders Elevating the Employment First movement, and allow me to again wish you a happy Neurodiversity Celebration Week. We're really happy to be here with you. My colleague Heather and I are here to share today. We just have a few objectives that we're hopefully going to accomplish today. We're really hoping that this can be a dialogue as we share our stories and hopefully hear from you as well. Um, so today we'll understand the perspectives and experiences of leaders with invisible disabilities in the Employment First movement. If Employment First is brand new to you, don't worry, we will cover that in just a moment. Um, We'll explore how you show up in your workplace as a whole person, especially as a person and a leader with invisible disabilities, or as part of the neurodiverse community. We'll also apply knowledge to support yourself and your employees or colleagues in a holistic manner. Um, so, uh, just a few etiquette pieces as we kind of go through and talk about and share our stories, and as you might interact with the chat area or things like that. If you know one person with a disability, you know one person with a disability. Each of our stories is unique. I think you'll hear that shared today in our stories, and so when you know one person's story, you know that one person's story, and so. Um, we want you to take everything that you learned from us today and feel free to take it and apply it and use it in your own life, in your work as a leader, whatever the case may be. Um, Also, that we are critiquing ideas, not people. Again, we each have that unique story to share. And as we talk about different things that might come up, we want to talk about ideas and talk about those things in such a way that this is a safe space for all of us to kind of share together. Um, and please do take care of yourself during the session and accommodate as needed so that yes, that you're taking care of yourself today. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Vicky Ortiz. My day job is a curriculum developer and a trainer with the Colorado Office of Employment First. And again, I'll explain who we are just a little bit here in a second. Um, and I have this slide framed as an iceberg, and Heather's will be as well. Because as we talk about who we are as leaders and how we show up in the work that we do, we want to recognize that our experiences are kind of like the iceberg analogy. There are certain things that you see above the surface, right? Especially when it comes to being professionals and leaders in our field. And so, yeah, I work for the Colorado Office of Employment First. I'm also an emerging leader, a graduate of the Emerging Leaders Program through National APSE, which, if you haven't heard of them, it's the Association of People Supporting Employment First. Um, I'm also a graduate of the National Leadership Institute on Developmental Disabilities. I sit on the board of National APSE as well as the board of Colorado APSE. And I recently stepped into the role of policy chair with the Neurodiversity Chamber here in Colorado, which is super exciting. Um, and I do apologize today as I'm talking. If I'm a little raspy, I've been under the weather the past week or so, so bear with me as I chat with you all today. But that's kind of everything that you see on the surface. That's how I present as a professional, and those are some of the titles that I hold, things like that. And as you can imagine by the title of our session, I have a lot of other things going on, and have invisible disabilities and things like that that I navigate on a daily basis. So, um, the main thing to share is that I'm ADHD. If you haven't heard of that term before, it means I have autism as well as ADHD, so ADHD. I also navigate a lot of different mental health diagnoses below the surface, panic disorder, social anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder. I have chronic fatigue, ulcerative colitis. I've also dealt with depression at different times in my life and have childhood trauma in my history that has really shaped the way some of these things show up, and shaped how I interact and shape how I interact with the world around me as well. So yeah, all of that kind of going on under the surface that I'm navigating from day to day. And just to give you an idea of who the Colorado Office of Employment First is, if you've never heard of us before, we have a vision to create a culture of inclusive, meaningful, and competitive employment for all people. We do that by elevating equitable employment in Colorado and nationally, for all people with disabilities. And we do that through collaboration, systems innovation, and training excellence. And we sit within JFK Partners, which is our state's, you said, our University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And so, all about, you'll hear Heather and I talk a lot about employment first today and a lot about employment. And all that employment first really means, if that is new to you, is that well, I guess at its base, it's a mindset piece, right? So we believe that anyone can work if they want to with the right support, and they should have access to that support. And so at the federal level, it really just means anyone that is receiving any state funded supports and services, that employment should be an expectation. Um, that should be the first and preferred option for people, is that they are expected to pursue employment just like anyone else. So no matter what type of disability you have, how it presents in your life, if you have more than one diagnosis, whatever those barriers are that there might be to employment, it doesn't exempt you from employment. Everyone should be able to pursue that if they want to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather to introduce herself.
Hello, good to be here with you all today. I'm Heather Hagan. I'm the Director of Employment Services at DDRC. We are a provider in the Denver metro area. I'm a graduate of the National APSE's Emerging Leaders Program, which Vicki talked about, and also a graduate of the National Leadership Institute on Developmental Disabilities. Maybe I haven't updated my slides recently, but I am also on the Colorado APSE board and the board for Tri-County Workforce Development Board, serving Jeffco, Gilpin, and Clear Creek counties. And you can go on to the next one. So that's me, my professional world. But as Vicki just described, we have a lot going on that people don't see. So, and I'll talk more about this so you guys know kind of the context and understand better. But I have diagnoses of bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. I have ADHD symptoms, which I will explain that more because that's not typically how people describe that. And then I have generalized anxiety disorder. So that's all the stuff that you wouldn't see if I was just introducing myself to you in a professional setting. And then we can go to the next one. And so, like I said, I work at DDRC, a provider in the Denver metro area. DDRC stands for Dignity, Dedication, Respect, and Choice. And so we are working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to really engage in the world in the ways that are meaningful to them. And in my little corner of the world, I get to focus on employment. All right, so I'm up first to share with you some of my story, and I'm actually going to switch to another screen just so that I can make sure I share the things that I want to share with you. So if any of you are children of the 90s, some of these things may look familiar to you. Starting with those slouchy socks, as a kid, these are just some signs that looking back now, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes more sense with some more context. I would take 10 to 15 minutes in the morning trying to get those slouchy socks to feel right before I could leave home. When it came to school, I would have difficulty with reading. Like I would reread the same paragraph over and over, going word by word. Okay, I got what that means, but I couldn't grasp that whole concept. After school, I'd come home and then I'd play school. On my whiteboard, I would just practice perfect handwriting. Play for me was maybe not what you would typically see for a child. If you see that Fisher Price kitchen, I had that, and I loved to play by cleaning it. Like cleaning it was playing for me. And I would jump on my trampoline, but I would choreograph routines to music. So I didn't really have the sense of like free play. There was a lot of organization and structure, routine and predictability were things that were a line throughout my childhood. Very much an organized kind of kid. So I'm going to move on to the next one. We'll talk about what things look like in my early adulthood. So I think after college, I kind of got to a stable point in my life where my symptoms were present, but generally managed. And, I would do like a top to bottom cleaning of my whole house every week while my husband was at work. And sometimes I wish that woman still lived inside me. I really lived by the structure of having a planner, that those routines, those expectations. And at work, I would notice that I would get uncomfortable if somebody, came and used an item at my desk. And so I would need to like use a sanitizing wipe to make that feeling go away. And that was really, looking back, maybe one of the first signs of my life with contamination OCD. So that's the type of OCD that I have, is contamination OCD. And at that point, I would have described it truly as like kind of annoying, but like I could work with it, So it was these little things, and okay, but I could deal. But I'll talk to you. If I go to the next screen, we've got. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Vicki. In 2015, that's when things really took a turn for me. So my son was born in 2015, and I had a postpartum doctor's appointment with him. And the doctor's talking to me about, like if I had friends or family that were going to interact with him, just making sure that they wash their hands because of like germ transmission. And most people, I think, would hear that from their doctor and say like, okay, got it, and move along with their day. But for myself, it really felt like my eyes, like I describe it as like they just opened for the first time. And I, at that moment, became aware of everything. I became aware of how everything I touched was a transmission. So I touched the door handle, and then I touched my baby. And it just became like hyper vigilant at that point. And back then, I would say I still had the energy to clean everything all of the time. So still managing, in quotes, but there were expenses. So I definitely was a less present parent because I was more concerned about everything that I could see and all the things that I needed to keep my baby safe from. I'll spare you the details, but we had, when my son was about 6 months old, we moved closer to be close to our families. And I had significant changes. I left a job that I really, really loved. And I felt like I had to grieve that. We had moved into a family friend's home that nobody had lived in for several years. That was really neglected. And so that really heightened things with my, that hypervigilance about cleanliness and germs. The work that I was doing was working with youth who were just in some pretty tough life situations. But because of that, I often found myself in very bad living situations with them, in unsanitary homes, concerns with bed bugs, lice, all that kind of stuff. And it being in a really small county, so kind of all the other people, all of my colleagues who were also doing this work, all of their kids were going to daycare with my son. And so it was kind of like contamination everywhere. So I started to see some patterns arise that helped me control those feelings. and build that separation between like safe places and unsafe places. So I would change my clothes when I got home. I would deep clean and sanitize my vehicle at the end of my work week, clean off my phone, excessively wash my hands. Um, and at that point, I was able to mask a lot of those internal struggles from my husband and my family. It felt more at that point of like this internal churn that I was facing, and I was managing it with some external changes that I thought I could try and hide. Oftentimes, I think to others, this came across as me being, controlling, bitchy, kind of stuck up. Hope that's okay to say on YouTube. But I think that it's because you're facing so much internally. The way that you present to the outside world, it can really just be like totally not reflective of your actual experience. So then we were there for a couple of years. We came back to Colorado in 2018. I got back into doing this kind of work that I love. And I felt like things kind of started to even out a little bit. Like I'd kept some of the methods that I had gained along the way. But I don't know. I think maybe just I was able to explain them a little bit better, right? Like we had moved back here, our stuff was in storage for a year. So then I was like cleaning everything off. Well, that makes sense. I can kind of explain that away as like it's been just sitting. So of course it needs to be cleaned. At this point, I still would describe myself as being like in a manageable state. Well, air quotes with that for sure. But I had a high level of physical and emotional burden that I was taking on to keep it that way. And so as a result, I ended up with shingles shortly after starting my job due to the high stress that I was living under, just kind of day to day, trying to manage all of this and keep going. You can go to the next slide, Vicki. Thank you, Eddie. Okay, so if anybody remembers what this is, this is COVID in 2020. And COVID was really a breaking point for me. I think, well, it was two things actually. One, it was validating because, well, let me explain. Our whole family, we were home, we were shielding ourselves from that global pandemic. And all of kind of my worst fears or those feelings that I had been having since 2015, when I met with that doctor, were starting to come true. And some of those like outrageous responses that, we were all having, like sanitizing our groceries, wearing masks and gloves, using sanitizers, washing, everything. These were now considered like reasonable actions to be taken by the CDC. And so there was this feeling of like validation, like, oh my God, everybody else sees what I see. And like now everybody's behaving in a way that makes total sense. But it was also, like I said, a real breaking point for me because I really spiraled in that time. At my worst, I mopped myself in circles in my kitchen for 5 hours while I was supposed to be working. Couldn't fold laundry unless things were just right. Kind of getting back to that feeling with the slouchy socks, like I just can't get it right. And if I just can't get it right, I can't move on. So there was a lot of things that were happening at that point. I'll spare you all the details, but I really felt like, nothing was going to harm my family, right? And I had this figured out about how to keep us safe. So I just couldn't function. Lost so much weight. I couldn't eat. Super anxious. I couldn't sleep. Snappy and on edge. It was not a good spot for me and my family to be. So, not really knowing what to do, just knowing that I was really not doing well. I called our local center for mental health and asked for help. Now, what was interesting is that at this time in the world, we had our global pandemic going on. And so my providers were actually really cautious about assigning OCD as a diagnosis for me, because there were so many people struggling during the pandemic and seeking out that mental health support. So the question was, is your experience just a sign of the times, like everybody's struggling, or was it more? And I honestly second guessed myself, and what I was experiencing, and wondered why they would only ever reference what was going on as obsessive or compulsive tendencies. Years later, I got connected to a new psychiatrist, and I actually just said, like, do I actually have OCD? Because I had felt too nervous and like unsure to ask before. And I really just needed to know, like, is my experience valid here? Um, so I went on for a while, working to manage my OCD and my anxiety with medications and talk therapy. And I've since learned that talk therapy is often detrimental for people who have OCD. And that was the case for me for sure. Today, I'm connected to a new psychiatrist, and I have an OCD specific therapist, just with the type of um, therapy that's recommended for OCD. So that's helpful. But as time went on, I started to feel comfortable with my new psychiatrist, and I obviously felt comfortable to ask about my OCD diagnosis and confirm that that was really true. And then I had also asked for an ADHD assessment. I had asked for that with my previous psychiatrist, and was told like, why would you need to do that? And I was like, oh, that's not a good answer. So that was kind of a weird blow for me. But I had eventually, with my new psychiatrist, I went through a full psychological evaluation. I thought it was great. I think I would suggest everyone to do it. But I will say I was a bit shocked because my psychologist had called me and she said, it looks like you might have a mood disorder. And I thought, like, girl, we're here talking about ADHD, like, okay. And she just kind of let me sit with it. And so I gently took that in, kind of over the next week. And then we went through my final report. And as it turns out, she said that I have all of the symptoms of ADHD, but those are actually rooted in my bipolar diagnosis. So I always say that I got two for the price of one. Um, and so, when I think about bipolar, I've always had this idea of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, when I hear that term. So it took time for me to understand what that really meant for me and what I needed for myself. What I came to understand is that while my mood can sometimes be impacted, more often I see my bipolar symptoms in relation to my energy levels. So things at work like in-person meetings, conferences, daily tasks that take me out of my home, can be a significant energy drain for me. And so I plan around that. I watch for signals that I'm losing my energy so that I can give myself what I need to replenish my reserves. And these signs look like, not being able to engage socially. So just kind of like shutting down, spending excessive time in bed or sleeping, pronounced executive functioning issues, like not being able to get out of bed and go do the work that I love. And then I also recognize things that are energizing for me. And I can recognize when I'm at higher points in my energy level, so that I can try to help myself stay in a more neutral space. So it has certainly been a journey to learn myself, right? Like, and figure out what's going on. So there's learning that as your own individual self. If you want to go to the next slide, Vicky, I'll talk about what it's like to understand that and as a leader in this space and to show up. Because I work in the employment first space. I work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I had presented this session at a conference last year, and someone who's known me that whole time, he was like, yeah, like we always knew, like you were part of our community. And I was like, I really didn't know that I was part of the disability community. So it was interesting to navigate, right? Because I was still living my life as a professional leader in the employment first movement. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now here I am part of this community. So some of the things that I've experienced along the way include, questioning my status as a person with a disability, honestly, more often than I can count. I've looked at the ADA definition so many times to be sure that I really can check that disability status box on a form. And I often, don't feel like I can claim my experience because it's mostly invisible to others. especially in my work life. So going through this kind of questioning and reaffirming process has helped me learn and understand myself in a layered approach. So every time I go through it, I feel like I become a better version of myself and more understanding as a professional. But it also is kind of strange because I think, when I meet people for work, like they wouldn't know that I have these disabilities unless I share that with them. And I think there's kind of this weird spot where I'm like, I'm part of this community, but people often don't know unless I disclose it. And so it can feel like a really weird spot to be in as a professional when you're perceived as somebody kind of on the outside, like not knowing these things. I had another experience with my employer. So we were at like this inclusivity training, and the speaker asked, some question that I can't remember to this day. But my response to it, I do remember. And I said to myself, like, you know what, even though I work for an organization that's dedicated to people with disabilities, our mission is rooted in full inclusion and value, I still don't necessarily feel comfortable being my whole self here. And I question that if people knew of my diagnoses, would they consider me less competent? And I'm, if I'm feeling that way at an organization that really is trying, right? We have awareness and we're trying to do things that are aligned with making sure that we have an inclusive workplace. This should be an ideal place to disclose. So what does that mean for other people who have visible and invisible disabilities in our larger workforce and with other employers? And so I started to question, like, what can I do to better educate and empower employers through my professional role? And I've experimented with sharing about my disabilities with certain employers just to help show the breadth of disabilities in hopes that they can expand their vision of potential employees. And I think it's an interesting space to navigate, for sure, especially since, I've had experiences that have made me question, am I part of this community? And so to really show up and show the full range of what disability looks like in our world and in our workforce has been important. I've also learned to be selective about who I share with and how much I share. So you'll see in the graphic, excuse me, says privacy is power. What people don't know, they can't ruin. And I've just learned that through different experiences that I'm going to choose what I share, how much I share with certain people. Specifically with my team, whenever a new team member joins us on their first day, I share with them that I have invisible or hidden disabilities. And the way that they typically show up at work is in my energy levels. So, I'll explain that I try to group some in-person meetings together so I can anticipate and plan for that reduced energy. It just helps set expectations, about my hybrid work schedule. It allows team members to support each other when they know that I might not physically be there. And I also find that it opens a really important door between myself and employees, just letting them know that they can and they should show up as their whole selves at work, and their experience will be honored and supported. I've had many impactful conversations with people who I supervise, and I think it sets a tone for how we care for one another. I've also shared with some other leadership within DDRC, but it's definitely a very small and intentional group who I lean on for support. Lastly, well, not almost lastly, I've always, been thoughtful of language, but I think I understand it on a deeper level now, right? I know now how it feels when people joke about, being so OCD about this or that, and considering it like just an organized way of life, when I know what it feels like to absolutely lose the ability to function every day. So I try to ask questions so I can improve my language and speak up when I know that I've gotten something wrong when speaking about other disabilities. And not everybody can do this, but I will say that one of my biggest supports now that I'm more routinely living life understanding my diagnoses is to have somebody like Vicky. So she is my best friend in this world. And from the start of our work together, we just really got along well, and we could see how our strengths were complementary to each other. And we both went about learning of our disabilities within 1 or 2 years of each other. And so being able to be seen and heard and supported in a genuine and honest way has made a huge difference. Um, my family members can sympathize and understand in certain ways, but I know that Vicky can relate to my personal experience, even if she hasn't had the same one. So we both know what it's like to feel like we don't have as much claim to our disabilities as others who have more visible disabilities. We can recognize the exhaustion of just trying to live some days, and being able to talk with someone who knows that feeling. I had a particularly chaotic and stressful week, and I knew that I could cancel meetings with Vicky. I could ask her to help support on some projects that we had together. And I think I sent her a text message just saying, like, I knew if I could collapse under it all with anyone on my schedule, it would be you. So, yeah. So I think just having those really great supports in life are super helpful, understanding yourself, and showing up in workspaces in ways that feel comfortable to you. So lastly, I'll just share some of my favorite memes because I am a millennial, an elder millennial. So some of my favorite memes here, there's the one on the top left. Someone says, I love cleaning and organizing my things. I'm so OCD. And they say at the bottom, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Certainly very true. Next one with the frogs. I like your personality. Thanks, it's a disorder. Because I think especially with OCD, you find a lot of oversharing, and there are things that I think might come across as like that's just who you are and your personality, but honestly, those are effects of your diagnosis. So, also, I like the drugs are bad one, unless you're bipolar. So say perhaps to drugs. You're so funny. Thanks. I would have been lobotomized in the 1940s. OCD is not an adjective, if I can leave you with that today. And then, of course, the two dogs hugging. That's Vicky, my best buddy, who's been a super huge support along the way. And I will just invite you to compare my slides to this next slide that Vicky's going to show you, because I think it just shows you the difference in the way that we approach work and life. Vicky is a very organized person, and compare that to my just screen of memes here. So thanks for listening, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation after Vicky shares some of her story.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather, for sharing your story and your kind words as always. And I know we have some people watching. I do have the live chat open, so I'm trying to keep an eye on that as well. If anyone has anything, please do let us know, and we'll have hopefully some good reflection questions here at the end as well. But yes, let me share a little bit about my story now. So I grew up gifted, talented, and undiagnosed. I was in our gifted and talented program, and really what this very organized 4 quadrants hopefully communicates is that all the signs were there growing up. And I don't think it's not that I don't think I know that this sort of thing was not top of mind for my family. It was not top of mind when it came to girls, right? There's a certain stereotype of what it meant to have autism. And even to this day, we don't have a lot of research and information around how it presents in women. It is an area where we're seeing evolve, but still pretty limited. So yeah, I grew up kind of feeling like I was an alien dropped on this planet. My whole life just felt drastically outside of my comfort zone, and I think a lot of those signs started in that top left quadrant there in childhood. I also played differently, not in the same sense that Heather shared, but liked to play alone. I didn't need to play with other kids. I didn't necessarily want to. I did a lot of play alone. I felt uncomfortable around other children at times. I did a lot of organizing and matching. I remember going into like second or third grade, I think it was, being like, Mom, everything has to be plain. It has to match. I don't want any sort of designs or anything. It has to be this certain way. Um, I've always been a collector of various things. Growing up, I collected like Beanie Babies, American Girl dolls, and not just like a few when it came to Beanie Babies, like hundreds of them. And they were always all lined up in a certain way and displayed a certain way, things like that. Looking back, I also had a lot of, and still do, a lot of food and texture sensitivities that I never realized were pointing to neurodiversity and pointing to anything related to a diagnosis at the time. And again, that's something that never would have crossed my family's mind to even look into anything like that. I was just always the shy little girl. Um, I also grew up with taking things literally as well. Um, so one example of that being, I remember I went to summer camp and we were going to a pool and I had a little like a two-piece swimsuit and that was a big no-no at church camp. So they said, just put on a t-shirt. So what did I do? I just put on a t-shirt, only a t-shirt. No swimsuit, just the t-shirt. Because my brain thought literally that just meant only, not in addition to. So, and grew up always thinking literally and things like that. Also, from a very young age, issues with skin picking and nail biting and trichotillomania, which if you don't know what that is, it's pulling at hair and things like that. So again, I'm not going to spend that much time on each quadrant, but the signs were all there in childhood. And we just didn't know what to look for. In growing up, getting into high school and college, I was very socially awkward. I wasn't that person that was going to initiate conversations or things like that. I was a very high performer, again, gifted and talented, in all of those programs. I spent a lot of time like I said, feeling like an alien from another planet. And so if I were to say um, that I like want spent time like if I feel left out, like you might be tempted to say, well, everyone feels that way a little bit, right? Like that's how it is as a when you're a teenager. That's how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel kind of like trying to feel like you're trying to fit in. It was beyond that for me. It wasn't just, oh, I want to fit in, I want to be popular. It was, I'm literally studying every action of the humans and friends around me to figure out how the heck I do life and how I'm supposed to respond to things or what I am supposed to wear and all of those sorts of things. So lots of people pleasing, lots of studying the world around me. That moved on into college. My very first day of college, I was in a freshman seminar, and oftentimes us neurodiverse folks, ladies, can come across as stuck up sometimes because of being so quiet and socially awkward, and um, that is how I was perceived from the very beginning, even by this one person who was in my freshman seminar course. He was like, his name was Mike. And he was just like, yeah, he thought I seemed kind of stuck up. And 4 years later, I married him. So, found a husband that way. Um, but anyway, yeah. So it just made it really hard to create friendships and things like that. And I struggled a lot with that over the years. That sense of organization carried itself into college and adulthood with color coding and categorizing, things like that. Um, I started to really watch the same shows repetitively, and that still to this day, I have my handful of shows that I get made fun of all the time for like rewatching over and over and over again. Um, as an adult, I started to really understand or recognize that I didn't know who I was, and I didn't feel like I belonged, like in the most like I don't even know how to like explain it, but like I just didn't really feel like I belonged and I knew who I was outside of some of these things. And so I was masking a lot, not knowing that that's what I was doing. I started to develop anxiety, or at least recognize that I had anxiety. I think I had it for a long time and just didn't know what to call it. And when that's all you feel all day, every day for so long, you don't realize what's going on. Um, I continued to do a lot of like scripting in my brain, especially like for work and stuff like that. Always thinking, okay, if this person says this, I'm going to say this. This is exactly how I'm going to do something. Like old Vicky would have had like a word for word script for even like a presentation like this. Um, and so, yeah, and I would get all of my mannerisms from like mimicking other people. Um, yeah, so basically all that to say like life is just always had always felt like really outside of my comfort zone. Oh, and I was doing things that I realized like um were later realized were stimming and fidgeting and things like that. That's enough talking about the traits probably, but so I would say it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago. I had what I consider my autistic awakening. Um, at some point in life here, I was just like, for any Taylor Swift fans out there, like, hey, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It is me. Like, I felt like one huge problem, one huge inconvenience, like something's wrong with me. Why do I feel this way? And I had really started this journey of self-discovery. This happened shortly after I entered this field. I think I started like hearing different experiences and realized that some of the things I was hearing and reading about like described me a little bit. Um, and I was also online like soaking up the stories and experiences of other people, and I really started to see myself in them. Namely in, for those of you who uh, might follow Elise Myers, she has disclosed somewhat rec in recent years that she has ADHD, and as she was sharing about herself and sharing about her diagnosis, I was like, that's me. I'm like that. That sounds a lot like me. Same thing happened with Morgan Harper Nichols, who is a poet. She also shared her diagnosis. I think that's been about 5 years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there are these women sharing their stories. And I think these are my people, but I'm not sure. And so I kept learning um, and kept trying to figure it out. And um, eventually I got to the point where, I was like, I'm ADHD, and I hadn't really sought diagnosis yet, but I was just identifying in that way because I'm like, yeah, I'm um, definitely meet the criteria as far as I see it. Little did I know, at the same time, I have a sister who's 8 years younger than me. She was also researching the same things about herself, and neither one of us knew it. So that was a really interesting moment. And we all know that these diagnoses are hereditary, so it made sense. She mentioned it one day on social media, and I was like, oh, sis, we need to talk because yeah, that's exactly what I'm going through. So all of this kind of reached a point where, and I would say um, escalated to the point where um, I was sitting in my kitchen one day. It was just myself. And then my daughter, who's now 4. This would have been I guess a couple years ago, a year ago. I don't even remember anymore. A little over a year ago, I think now. But she was sitting there, and all of a sudden, and she was eating in her high chair, and all of a sudden, I didn't know what was going on. And I felt like I was having a heart attack. Everything just felt so heavy. I had to sit down and lay down my head. And I was having all of these symptoms and um, like not being able to bend my fingers. And like I legitimately just thought I was having a heart attack. And it was the most frightening moment of my entire life. And for any of you listening who know someone who's been through this, or if you've been through this yourself, you know I'm describing a panic attack. I didn't know that at the time. And so, yeah, all the panic, none of the disco. I began having severe panic attacks. And I guess long story short there, I ended up getting so much support And my body was forcing me to figure out what was going on more than it ever had. Um, and so Heather was one of those people that was there from just those really early days, being like, what can I do? Like when she said, I'm getting ahead of myself, but when she said, find a Vicky, like find a Heather, find your people that are going to understand you and be there and support you. Because she was over at my house, she was helping out and doing, dishes and helping with my daughter at the time and all of that sort of thing. But one thing led to another, and through these panic episodes, these panic attacks, I got connected to a psychiatrist. I got on medication, um, and also got connected to talk therapy. And one of my like litmus tests um, for finding a good therapist was like, I'm gonna tell them I'm ADHD and see how they respond. And and so I did, and I talked about it with one consultation I was doing to figure out who I wanted to see. And the first therapist I ever met with was so supportive, and she's like, if it's your desire, we can get you connected to testing and all these things. And I've had always wanted to get tested, but never did because I'm autistic and I don't want to talk on the phone. So I don't want to pick up the phone and call to look into it or anything like that. So ironically, the diagnosis itself was the reason why I wasn't getting the diagnosis. But so got connected to talk therapy, got connected to somatic therapy, and between the medication and all of the tools and resources and support from friends and family, I did not know the weight I was carrying as a neurodiverse person until I felt the freedom, until I felt relief. Um, and that was a huge, huge turning point for me in my life. And I consider, I have a little excerpt of my diagnosis at the bottom of this screen. I consider my 13-page autism diagnosis report to be my 13 pages of freedom. And I'll say, not everyone feels the same way about about a diagnosis, but the day that I found out for sure, like I have this diagnosis, I bawled my eyes out in just happiness because it felt free. There was a reason uh, um, for why my experience was the way it was. And so I really felt for the first time that I could like explore who I was authentically. Um, that was a really long story, but I'll move on to the next slide here in a second, but I also wanted to read the one meme that I have here because I think it's important. And it's, why do you need a label? And it's because there's comfort in knowing that you are a normal zebra, not a strange horse. I thought I was just a strange, weird human for so many years, that I was a strange horse. But because you can't find a community with other zebras if you don't know you belong, and because it's impossible for a zebra to be happy or healthy spending its life feeling like a failed horse. And I'm not a failed horse. I'm a super awesome zebra. So, and that's exactly, I was made to be exactly the way I am. So, having that diagnosis was truly freedom. So I'll kind of go through this quickly so we can get to some of our questions in case people have. Oh, we do have some people coming in chat. Yay, chat's working. Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'm glad to hear some of this is resonating with you guys. Um, so I had the same disclosure dilemma that Heather did, especially working in a disability field. I had to ask myself, because I entered the disability field not knowing I had a disability, just like Heather, and not having that diagnosis. And so I had to ask myself, do I feel comfortable in a disability field, disclosing my disability? And to this day, the answer is no, not always. Um, I am so fortunate to have people like Heather and others who truly get it, and I do feel safe disclosing and talking around, including my team at the Office of Employment First. Each and every person on my team um, is phenomenal and accommodating. That being said, there are some spaces and projects that I've worked on that I don't feel comfortable. Excuse me, I didn't feel comfortable sharing my disability, or I don't know how it's going to be received, or if it'll be accommodated. Um, so I have to ask myself, will the stigma of having autism, um, like how will that affect me? Will stigma affect my impact? Will people perceive me as less knowledgeable or having less capacity or expertise just because I've shared that I have a disability? Will I be patronized more often or looked down upon or dismissed because um, because of my disability? I've also always navigated imposter syndrome and still do. Still don't know how or why I'm at tables where I am. And uh, so adding this on was like a whole nother layer of, okay, I already had this imposter syndrome as many women do, but um, how does that layeredness of disability work with that as well? I often and still do feel like an island between communities because my autism is and other disabilities are relatively non-apparent. Um, I don't feel like I always fit in with um with the disability community with folks that like I don't even know how to say it, like that are, known as strong advocates in this work and or in the world that I work in and things like that. Like I don't feel like I can identify as a person with a disability sometimes because I was never part of that world till recently. But then I also don't feel like I can pull it off as someone who's neurotypical either because I'm not neurotypical. So, like, what does that even look like? So, I feel like sometimes just alone, especially if I haven't diagnosed, I think there's just so many layered nuances there. Um, and then again, I think what's got me through so many of that is having Heather, having a best friend who understands. Um, and I love that our relationship has just gone through a lot, like starting from working together. And I think we supported each other in lots of ways, like she was mentioning earlier, before we even knew we had these diagnoses. And I'm just so grateful that we've just grown together as friends since I had the position where I worked with her. So finding your people, I think, is really important, whether you work in the disability field or elsewhere. And I also have always admired Heather because she does relate to those that work with her. So if you're a leader, if you're a manager, whoever you are watching, like leading by example and being not being afraid to be open about what you might navigate or just talking with your employees, things like that, I think is really helpful and it helps create safe spaces and helps make people um, feel brave in those spaces too. Um, and so s- being newly diagnosed, I immediately felt like I was ready to take on the world. I felt like I had clarity of self. And I'm still learning and discovering myself, just like Heather said she is too. And I have different aha moments all the time about my diagnoses related to my life. And now more than ever, like I've just embraced it and used it as like, okay, now I know who I am and how I want to move forward. And I really like this quote from the Maori culture from that says that autism is referred to as takiwaitanga. I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. I lived in New Zealand for a time, but still didn't learn the Maori language very well. But it translates into in his or her own time and space. And I really feel like as a leader in my field, that's exactly what I'm doing, and that's okay. I'm figuring it out in my own time, in my own space. All right. And I'm a millennial too, so I've got memes also. Um, Autism is basically having the soul of a golden retriever and the nervous system of a raccoon on espresso. That's it. That's the definition. That's exactly it, if you're gonna ask me. Um, the gifted kid, aka how did you go this far without getting diagnosed with autism or ADHD? And I did go so long without getting diagnosed with those. Um, but yeah, it definitely tracks for me. What if I'm not autistic, though? The only way to answer this question is to make autism my special interest for the next few years and research and think about it all the time, which is a very normal thing people do. I was always like, well, what if I'm not? What if I'm lying? And I spent so much time focused on that. which in itself was a sign. Um, Everyone feels like they're cosplaying as a person. No, ma'am, you have the autism. And that's exactly what it felt like for so long, is I'm just cosplaying as a person. All right, so that is my story. Thanks for listening, and thanks for listening to my raspy voice. Um, and Yeah, and thanks to the person who shared also ADHD and still searching for a safe community. It's disorienting at times. Yeah. Well, we'll share our information at the end. Feel free to always reach out to us. You've got people with Heather and I for sure. Happy to listen and support in any way that we can. And we have a few I'm going to keep the chat open. We have a few questions that we'd love to pose your way for anyone that is, I'm going to move my other little screen up, for anyone that is watching, joining in with us. If anyone wants to share or has questions for us or wants to share anything related to this question of just how has your invisible disability shaped your path? Is there anything that anyone would want to share or ask us? I'm going to give it a minute.
Yeah, and as people are maybe sharing, I'll just mention my eyes are really bothering me today, so I'm not crying. I'm literally just they're like really
We just
itchy
love
or
each other
something.
that much.
Oh
I'm
my God, oh my God, oh my
kidding.
God, Maggie. Yeah, no, it's just wanted to make mention of that.
I'll also flip to our other questions in case.
Yeah.
This is like not, you don't have to even answer these questions. If you just have thoughts, this is just really to um, get people thinking. So where do our systems fall short for people with invisible disabilities? How can we be, good grief. How can we support leaders with invisible disabilities?
It's a great comment. I don't know, Vicky, if you saw that.
Oh, let's
Um,
see. Oh yeah, go ahead, Heather.
yeah, hopefully I'm getting that right. And she said, I'm still learning. Everything you said, Vicky, clicked with me. I appreciate those moments where I feel not alone.
Yeah, and I think that's Leslie. If I, it's the picture is teeny, teeny, tiny. Hi, Leslie. I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
you. I think that's you. Thank you. Yeah, and I know for me, like it can feel really, it can feel really hard or vulnerable to ask for accommodations, especially when your disability is invisible. And I think I've just had to, um, and something I teach all the time when I train other professionals is that accommodations aren't something that like it's not doesn't mean I have failed because I need to ask for, because I'm the people pleaser perfectionist, right? Like it doesn't mean I failed. It means I've learned how my brain works and I'm setting my brain up for success and that I need to just be bold and advocate for myself. And it takes practice. It's not something that happens overnight. But the more that you learn about yourself and what works for your brain, write it down, bring it up the next time. If you need that something put in a bullet point form or you need something, a few days in advance, something like that, practice advocating for yourself. Find some support, someone that can help you advocate for yourself. Maybe you even need to bounce it off of someone else first. Whatever it is that's going to work for you. Oh, and we've got some stuff coming in. Let's see. Um, This person says it's made me stubborn on some level. My stubbornness has inadvertently protected me along the way. Isn't that funny how that works? I feel like that resonates with me as well. Late diagnosed with autism at 56 just last year. My experience sounds similar to Vicky's growing up. Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing how you can look back. And I know as part of the process, you get interviewed and they talk, the person evaluating you talks to you, but they also talk to your family. And so it was really cool to see. For me, it was cool. Again, this is not everyone's experience, but it was really cool to see my family's responses and see the signs that were there. Like one of the things I know my mom says that she remembers this came full circle recently. You'll realize why when I say it. But when I was in high school, I went to see Wicked on Broadway with one of the high school, it was probably like Honor Society or something. And she said that she did not hear the end of it. I perseverated on Wicked so much for so long. So like even hearing that, like things like that is like, oh my gosh, like it was there. Or hearing stories from my sister and her perspective on how I was growing up. Um, all the signs were there. Um, and Heather, jump in as I'm reading these. If don't let me like.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah.
Um, we can support people by believing them when they express a need for accommodation. Yes, there isn't a look to autism, and I'm not a Karen if I need an accommodation. Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's no. Autism doesn't look one way. If, like I said, if you know one person with a disability, you know one person with a disability. Yeah. Leslie says, a leader, it's tough to find balance. Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard too, I think, as a leader to show up consistently, which can come off like it sounds weird to say that, but like I could be in a meeting, like, I don't know, like crushing it, like, yeah, that went really well. I feel like I was articulate, and then the next day I wake up and the words aren't there and I'm not feeling articulate or I'm not feeling, it can even fluctuate like during a presentation. Um, with just, yeah, how different traits can present themselves from a day-to-day basis can make it really hard.
Yeah, and I think definitely as a leader in any field, it can be difficult, especially it's a space that you've never navigated before. If you're thinking about like how can I kind of open up the conversation, right? Like we don't know what other people are going to say or what their responses are going to be or what their understanding or perceptions of what we're sharing with them are. And so it can be really vulnerable to open yourself up. And so certainly I've found just choosing, right? Choosing the people that you are going to test that out with. And it's really, at least in most of the places that I show up, it's I've been met with warm, welcoming kind of understanding. But yeah, it is also really difficult because there are some days where I'm like Vicky said, oh my gosh, I had like the most productive day. I'm feeling like on cloud nine with my work. And then the next day I'm like, I can't do a thing. And it's those internal feelings that you have to work with, understanding, like giving yourself grace. And I think when you can start to understand it for yourself, you can show up and be a really strong leader for other people, even maybe on some days when you're not really feeling it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back and comment, excuse me, to the person who said, like, I'm not a Karen if I need an accommodation, right? And there's probably people listening in who have asked for accommodations. You might be on the receiving end as an employer of like getting that accommodation. Just know you're already accommodating your employees all the time, whether you
Mhm.
realize it or not. And accommodations only help us do our job better and fulfill employer expectations. Um, and yeah, like you might let someone go to get to an appointment early and or something like that. Like you do a million little things for your employees all the time, and those are accommodations. And so um I think what's really important as an employer and what I appreciate like about my team and about others who I trust is like I know they'll be curious to learn about how something looks in my life and about what I'm asking for. And that they'll believe me. Just like this person commented. So yeah, just know that an accommodation isn't us trying to get something that like no one else is getting. It's a matter of equity and helping us do our jobs really, really well. Um, so we want to show up and be successful. And then the last one I think I haven't, oh wait, I think I
Okay.
haven't read. Do you have it, Heather? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, Jinian said, as a leader at work, I'm interested in finding more ways to make the workplace more accommodating. There are often unnecessary rules that are unwelcoming and not really needed for doing the work. And I can relate to this. So even as working for a provider, an employer that supports people with disabilities every day, we're looking at our job descriptions and how not inclusive they are, how not accessible they are, and why are we asking for certain things when it really lends itself to a neurotypical person, or like why do we have these expectations, and like how else could this job be done? And that's at an employer that is trying, right? And so it's not surprising that we find all of those unnecessary and things that are popping up, roadblocks that really keep people from engaging and being present and part of their communities, as they should. So yeah, I think we're working through that. And I always think about, maybe this helps some of you too. Um, I started out in this kind of work being like let's burn it all down and like start fresh with something new, right? Like stuff's not working. And I've really kind of come full circle to seeing it as like, right, like the disability rights movement isn't something that just happened, right? Like we are still all part of it. It's this continuum that continues to grow. And so we've seen kind of the small but impactful steps that were taken, decades ago, and we are still doing that to this day. And so I think, that's just a great example of things that exist, right? We have like inaccessible job descriptions that cut people out of positions where they could thrive with even with different types of accommodations. And so yeah, I would just encourage you to keep finding those pieces, keep speaking to your experience, and kind of helping people understand and join this continued movement. And then there
Yeah.
was one other. Oh, Vic, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just gonna say, like, it really is like the culture you create, which I think is really what you're describing. And um, when we as employers are not, we don't have inclusive job descriptions, and we don't take those steps and really create the culture and put the time in to do that. I mean, honestly, it's only hurting the employer because you are not going to get the right fit of the person, or you're restricting the number of people that can say, hey, yeah, I am the right fit for your job, for your role, whatever it is. So, um, by investing in that, it's really, there's a reciprocity there. It's a benefit for those people looking for work, looking for that right position to say yes to, and for us as employers being able to make sure that we are tapping into the widest pool of talent possible to find the right fit.
Yeah. And then there's another comment saying, for me on disclosing, they get a positive reaction until they find out that they need to adjust their behavior to help reduce bias that neurodiverse folks face all the time. Yeah, and I mean, maybe Vicky, you're better to speak to this point, but I think there's, as somebody who works with employers often, I think people are scared of what they don't know, and oftentimes they get people getting in their own way when it comes to just supporting people or showing up for people in ways that you would for anyone else, right? Like people are like, oh my gosh, well, Vicky's autistic, so like you make up all these things in your mind about what Vicky needs. Well, no, Vicky just needs like me to be a good friend to her, or she just needs her employer to maybe, like she said, put things in bullet points. Like nothing outrageous, but I think it's there's a lot of work that comes on to people with disabilities to demonstrate like what is it we actually need, and dispel myths that people have in their minds about what it can look like.
Yeah, it's almost like there's like a disability tax on things, right? Like once you slap disability on it, what you're talking about, there's this like heightened level of like nervousness or like resistance to doing something. When if it was in a different context, it might not feel quite the same, if that
Yeah.
makes any
And I
sense.
think that's, as somebody who helps people with disabilities enter and advance in the workforce, I think this speaks exactly to what we see with employers most of the time. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are a lot of times where we'll explain like, hey, I've got this job seeker, and eventually we will maybe like my brother is autistic or my cousin has Down syndrome, when you know and understand it, right? Like there's a pathway in, but for people who have never or not known that they're interacting with people with disabilities, because a lot of times there's a lot of disabilities that are hidden, and you don't know, and that's the scary part. So I think we see that often with employers where they're like, oh yeah, like I have this family member or this friend, and so they've got that personal experience which reshapes what they think and what they know about disability.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks everyone who's been weighing in. Anyone else have any other thoughts or comments or questions? I also put up here like if there's anything you feel like you're taking with you today or a message that you have for other leaders out there or encouragement for others who are neurodiverse. I think my encouragement is just we need exactly who you were made to be. So show up um, as who you are, and that's all we can ask for. And I think that's really, really important. Um, and if you, I guess for me, coming from the context of like the imposter syndrome and not thinking like just take the step, take the leap of faith, make the decision, and find that person who's going to be your cheerleader. You find your Heather, who's going to support you. If
Yeah,
you
and
need someone, let us know.
yeah, please put our contact information up, Vicky.
Oh yeah,
I
let me.
think um I think one thing that I'll say is I just really respect the journey that this is. And I think sometimes, and hopefully Vicky and I haven't made you feel this way, but sometimes you feel like you kind of have to just jump in and do it all at once. And I think, for us reflecting back on several years of our life or our early childhoods, like you see it building. And I think just respecting your capacity for what you have at any moment in time. I think like I had said, I had a pretty rough time with talk therapy. And so that really impacted me wanting to go back and work with an OCD specific therapist. Um, and and so I think just allowing yourself that time to do what you need to take care of yourself, and be ready to take the next step. So, we're not encouraging you to just go to work or whatever wherever you go tomorrow and just start sharing in ways that are uncomfortable for you, but yeah, I think just slowly opening yourself up to seeing what your story is and how it unfolds, and knowing that certainly we are here to support you and share with you, and yeah, absolutely, you're not alone. So
Yeah, and yeah, remember your own time and place and what Heather just shared just, made me think of something I've been thinking about as well of like wrestling with the fact of putting yourself out there, right? Or like doing the uncomfortable thing and how like we're so pushed to do that. And I've always felt there was so much growth and discomfort, but what was never shared with me or was never taught to me is like you need to have the right support to navigate the discomfort and to put yourself out there. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to do those things, but do it with the right support in place. And prior to my first like really big panic attack, I didn't have the supports in place. So I was burning out and I was pushing myself and exposing myself to so many uncomfortable things that I thought were positive, but because I didn't have the right support, they were actually probably negative. But once I got all of that right support in place, I knew that I could take on the uncomfortable when I wanted to with the right support, and I'd be able to navigate those pieces. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that, Heather. We had a couple other pieces come through just saying thank you. This was validating. Love the online autism community for the same reasons. A few other people saying thanks. So our info is on screen right now. So feel free to reach out to one or both of us if there's anything we can do for you. And yeah, I don't know, anything else, Heather?
No, I just say thank you all for showing up, celebrating Neurodiversity Week with us. We are just happy to be here, happy to be part of this community, and yeah, yeah. Thanks so much for your time today.